Parents sold my car for golden child's sister as a compensation for her divorce. So, I guess I should start by saying that this whole mess happened because I just wanted to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them in a few months, and honestly, I thought everything was fine between us. You know, normal stuff, just busy with life. Plus, my dad had been complaining about his heart acting up again, which is always their go-to reason for getting me to drive down. Like, hey, your dad's not doing great. You should come see us before something happens. Classic. So, being the good daughter that I am, I figured I'd make the 6-hour drive to see them. Now, here's where things get tricky. My boyfriend, Patricia, had just bought this shiny new SUV. He's been saving up for it for like 2 years and he was super proud of it. You know the type of car that looks so good that you feel like a celebrity driving it? That's his car. He's had it for a couple of months and he lets me drive it sometimes because I had to put my old car in the shop. Some stupid thing with the engine I don't really get. Anyway, I asked Patricia if I could take his car for the weekend trip to my parents and he was cool with it. So I get to my parents' house and everything's pretty normal at first. We're catching up, talking about the usual stuff, how my job's going, how life's been since Patricia moved in with me last month. And of course, they ask about the car because it's hard not to notice how fancy it looks sitting in their driveway. I didn't think much of it when they asked whose car it was, so I just casually said, "Yeah, it's mine," which in hindsight was the dumbest thing I've ever said. But honestly, why would it matter, right? I mean, we're family. It's just a car. Fast forward to day 4 of my visit. I decided to meet up with a friend for lunch, one of those old high school friends who you only talk to a couple of times a year but still feel close to. So, I'm out for a few hours, and when I come back to my parents' house, I notice something weird right away. The car's gone. At first, I thought maybe my dad took it for a spin, which seemed kind of unlikely because his health isn't the best. But whatever, I didn't panic right away. So, I go inside and ask, "Hey, where's the car?" My mom's just standing there in the kitchen, super casual, like nothing's wrong, and she's like, "Oh, we sold it." I'm sorry, what? For a second, I thought she was joking. Like, who sells someone's car without asking them? Especially not your daughter's car, right? So I laughed, like, "No, seriously, where's the car?" But she wasn't laughing. She was dead serious. "We sold it," she said again, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I remember just staring at her, waiting for her to say it was a prank or something, but then my dad came in and backed her up, saying they got a pretty good price for it. I think I blacked out for a second, because it took me a minute to understand what was happening. They had sold Patricia's car. My boyfriend's brand new SUV that he saved for years to buy. They sold it. Just like that. When I finally started processing it, I was like, "What the hell do you mean you sold it? It's not even yours." And then my dad goes, "Well, you said it was yours, so we figured it was okay." I couldn't even form words like, who does that? Who sells a car without even checking if it's, legally theirs to sell? They start explaining how they took pictures of the car, sent them to some friends, and found a buyer who was willing to pay a lot for it. I asked them how much they got, and they said, "Oh, we gave the money to your sister. She needed a break after the divorce." At this point, my brain was short-circuiting. My sister? The same sister who has barely spoken to me in years? The same sister who lives out of state and never even bothers to visit unless she needs something? They sold the car to fund her vacation because she needed a break. I was livid. I started yelling at them, asking what the hell they were thinking. And you know what they said? "Well, you're doing well for yourself. You can buy another one. But your sister? She really needed this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They sold Patricia's car to give my sister a vacation and some jewelry, or whatever else they bought with the money. And they really thought that was okay because I was doing well. I told them they screwed up big time. Like, they had no idea what kind of trouble they were in. But instead of apologizing, they turned it around on me. My mom goes, "Well, if you'd just been honest and told us it wasn't your car, we wouldn't have sold it. This is really your fault for not telling us the truth." My fault? My fault? They were acting like I was the one who messed up. Like, I was the bad guy for not giving them all the details about the car. I mean, sure, I shouldn't have lied and said it was mine. But come on, who sells a car without even asking first? And then they had the nerve to say, I should have been honest because family doesn't lie to each other. At this point, I was shaking. I called Patricia right there in front of them and told him everything. My parents just stood there, looking horrified as I explained to him that his car was gone. Patricia was pissed, of course, but he tried to stay calm. He told me he'd handle it, but there was no way he wasn't pressing charges. And honestly, I agreed. I told my parents that if they didn't get the car back, Patricia was going to sue them, and I was going to help him. They started panicking, telling me not to do anything drastic. My mom was crying, saying, "You wouldn't hurt your own parents, would you? We're family." But at that point, I didn't care. They sold a car that wasn't even mine to sell. They betrayed me, betrayed Patricia, and acted like they were the victims. I left their house that day, completely numb, knowing things were never going to be the same. After I left my parents' house that day, I knew things were about to get messy. I was so angry. But it wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about the fact that my parents couldn't see how wrong what they did was. And on top of that, they had the audacity to blame me for their screw-up, like I was the one who made this whole thing happen. But anyway, I didn't have time to sit around and stew in my anger. I had to figure out what to do next. Patricia was understandably pissed, and the more I thought about it, the worse I felt for him. He had worked so hard to save up for that car. He deserved better than having his car sold off without even knowing it. It was like everything was happening in slow motion, and I was stuck in this nightmare of a situation I couldn't control. First things first, I called my parents and told them to get the car back. I didn't care what they had to do. Call the buyer, offer them more money, whatever it took. They had no choice. But of course, they started in with the excuses. My dad was all, "Oh, we already gave your sister the money and we don't want to upset her." Are you serious? I don't know what my sister's deal is, but she always somehow gets away with everything. It's like my parents have a permanent blind spot when it comes to her. The second she says she's upset or needs something, they're ready to bend over backward to make sure she's happy. But me? I'm just supposed to be the responsible one who has to understand everyone else's problems. This time, though, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I told them straight up that if they didn't get the car back, Patricia was going to press charges. And honestly, I'd be right there with him, backing him up all the way. And that's when my mom went into full panic mode. She started begging me, saying, "You wouldn't do that to your own family, would you?" It was like she was trying to guilt trip me into dropping everything. But I wasn't having it. I mean, they weren't even sorry for what they did. They were just sorry they got caught. And of course, instead of admitting they screwed up, my dad started blaming me again. He was like, "If you had just told us the car wasn't yours, none of this would have happened. You should have been honest with us from the start." I wanted to scream. Like, how is this my fault? They sold a car without asking and somehow that's on me? I told him straight up. This isn't about me lying. It's about you thinking it's okay to sell something that isn't yours. That's not normal. But he just shook his head like I was the one who didn't get it. "We did this for your sister. She needed the help." That's when I realized something. My parents weren't going to fix this. They weren't going to apologize. They were just going to dig their heels in and pretend they were in the right because they did it for family. As if that somehow makes it okay to screw me over. After that call, I sat in the hotel room with Patricia, going over everything that had happened. He was trying to stay calm, but I could see he was just as upset as I was. And he had every right to be. I mean, this was his car we were talking about. I was just caught in the middle of it, but he was the one who had to deal with the fact that his car had been sold without his permission. It wasn't fair. We started talking about what our options were. Patricia was ready to press charges, and honestly, I didn't see any other way. We tried being reasonable. We tried asking them to fix it, but they were acting like it wasn't a big deal. Like selling someone else's property was just something that could be forgiven because they were family. It wasn't just about the car anymore, though. It was about respect. My parents didn't respect me. They didn't respect Patricia. They just thought they could do whatever they wanted, and I'd roll over and take it because that's what I've always done. But this time was different. This time, they crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Patricia decided to call his lawyer and get the ball rolling on the legal side of things. I didn't want it to come to that, but at the same time, what choice did we have? My parents had already shown they weren't going to fix it on their own. So if this was what it took to get the car back, then so be it. Later that evening, I got another phone call from my mom. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had come to her senses. Maybe she realized how badly they had messed up and was ready to do the right thing. But nope, she was just calling to ask me to talk to Patricia and convince him not to press charges. "We can't afford a legal battle," she said. I almost laughed. "You can afford to sell a car and give the money to my sister, but you can't afford to deal with the consequences of your actions?" I asked. She started crying, talking about how they didn't mean to hurt me, how they were just trying to help my sister. It was like she didn't even hear what I was saying. I told her straight up, "This isn't about my sister. This is about you guys taking something that didn't belong to you and thinking it's okay because you're family. You're not getting out of this one, Mom." You need to get the car back or Patricia's pressing charges, and there's nothing I can do about it. She just kept crying, saying she didn't know what to do. I almost felt bad for her, but then I remembered how she didn't feel bad when she sold Patricia's car without even thinking twice. She didn't feel bad when she gave the money to my sister. She only felt bad now because she was caught. I hung up the phone, knowing that things were never going to be the same with my parents. They had shown their true colors and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't their priority. I was just an afterthought, someone who could take the fall so my sister could have her self-care vacation. Patricia and I spent the rest of the night talking about what to do next. We knew the legal stuff was going to be a mess, but it was the only way. My parents weren't going to fix this on their own, and we weren't going to let them off the hook. I didn't know what the next few weeks were going to bring, but one thing was clear. Things between me and my parents would never be the same again. Update 1. After the phone call with my mom, Patricia and I knew we were past the point of no return. The way my parents had brushed off the whole situation made it clear they weren't going to make this easy. And honestly, at that point, I didn't want easy. I wanted fair. I wanted them to take responsibility for what they did. Patricia and I decided to drive back to my parents' house to try one last time to talk some sense into them. Not for them, though. This was for me. I needed to look them in the eyes and make sure they understood the mess they'd caused. Plus, I had a feeling they were probably sitting there, hoping I'd just drop it and go away. I wasn't about to let that happen. When we pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding. Patricia parked the SUV and we sat there for a minute, not saying anything. I could feel the tension between us, not because we were mad at each other, but because this whole situation was so ridiculous. I couldn't believe I was about to walk into my parents' house and basically beg them to fix a mistake they made. "I'm ready if you are," Patricia finally said, breaking the silence. He was being way calmer than I felt, and honestly, I was grateful for that. I don't know if I could have handled this without him backing me up. We got out and rang the doorbell. My dad answered, and as soon as he saw us, I could tell he wasn't expecting me to be there for this. He looked me up and down like I was supposed to apologize or something, like I had done something wrong. "You back to talk some sense into your boyfriend?" he asked, not even looking at Patricia. The tone in his voice, condescending, like he was in control, was enough to set me off. But I held back, because this wasn't about fighting. Not yet, anyway. "No, we're here to talk about the car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't here to play games. "You've already caused enough problems," he said, stepping aside to let us in, but not before throwing one more comment out there. "Maybe you should have thought about all this before you lied to us." I could feel Patricia stiffen next to me, but I squeezed his hand to remind him to stay calm. We weren't going to get anywhere by yelling. We walked into the living room, and my mom was sitting on the couch, looking all nervous like she had been crying. My guess was she'd spent the last hour trying to convince herself they were the victims here. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at us like we were bringing bad news into her house, instead of coming to fix the mess she helped create. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." "Seriously," I started, sitting down across from them. Patricia stayed standing, his arms crossed, clearly not interested in wasting time. "We've already explained everything," my mom said softly, trying to act like the wounded party. "What more do you want us to say?" "We want the car back," Patricia cut in, his voice firm. "You sold something that didn't belong to you. You can't just shrug and say it's fine because it's family. You need to fix this." My dad rolled his eyes, which pissed me off immediately. "We're trying to fix it, but we already gave the money to your sister, and we don't want to take that away from her. You know how hard things have been for her." The fact that they kept bringing my sister into this was starting to get on my nerves. She wasn't the one who messed up. They were. But they kept acting like they couldn't take responsibility because it would hurt her feelings. I wasn't going to let them keep hiding behind her like some kind of shield. "I don't care about her vacation," I snapped. "This isn't about her. This is about the car. You need to get it back." My dad crossed his arms, looking all annoyed. "You're being unreasonable. It's not like you can't afford another one. You're doing well, aren't you?" I couldn't believe it. Doing well? That's what this was about? They thought because I wasn't struggling financially, it was okay to just steal something from me? I felt my face getting hot, and I knew I was about to lose it. "That's not the point," I yelled, standing up. "This is about respect. You took something that wasn't yours and sold it without even thinking about what it meant to me or Patricia. You don't get to decide what I can or can't afford. You don't get to make that call. My mom started crying again, of course. We didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to help your sister. She's had such a hard time, and you've always been so independent. We thought you'd understand. Understand what? That you thought it was okay to lie to me and steal from Patricia? Because that's what you did. You didn't sell my car, you sold his car, and you didn't even ask. At this point, Patricia finally spoke up again. Look, this doesn't have to get ugly. We just want the car back. Get in touch with the guy you sold it to, offer him the money, and we'll move on. But if you don't, I will press charges. And I don't want to do that, but I will. My dad stood up, clearly pissed off. You think you can just come into my house and make demands? Who do you think you are? You're not family. You're just some guy dating my daughter. I swear, Patricia handled it better than I would have. He stayed calm, even though I could tell he was furious. I'm the guy whose car you stole. That's who I am. There was this tense silence. My mom looked at my dad like she was begging him to back down, but he wasn't having it. He was too stubborn. I could see that now. He wasn't going to admit he was wrong. Not ever. Not even to save his own skin. We're not doing this, my dad finally said, shaking his head. If you want the car back so bad, take us to court. But I'm not giving in to your threats. I looked at Patricia and he nodded. That was it. We tried to be civil, but they left us no choice. Fine, I said, grabbing my bag and standing up. We'll see you in court then. As we walked out, my mom called after me, saying something about how we were making a big mistake and how she never thought I'd turn on them like this. But I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. Patricia and I got into his car, and as we drove away, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about respect, and they were about to learn that the hard way. Update 2. So after leaving my parents' house that day, Patricia and I were dead set on pressing charges. We tried to be civil, to give them a chance to fix things, but they blew it. I was mentally preparing myself for the mess that was about to unfold with lawyers, court dates, and all that. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a call from someone I really didn't expect to hear from, my sister. Now, a little backstory on my sister. We haven't been close for years. She lives out of state, rarely visits, and honestly, we're more like acquaintances than siblings at this point. She's the golden child in my parents' eyes, and I've just learned to live with it. But her calling me now? That was weird. I hadn't even spoken to her since this whole car situation blew up. At first, I ignored the call. I was already drained from everything that had happened, and I didn't feel like getting into more family drama. But she kept calling, over and over, until finally I answered just to get it over with. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. She didn't even bother with small talk. What the hell is going on? She demanded. Mom and Dad just called me saying you're threatening to sue them. What are you doing? I swear I could feel my blood pressure rise instantly, the nerve of her calling me and acting like I was the problem here. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. They sold Patricia's car, I said, without asking. They gave you the money, by the way, so you should probably know that. There was this pause on the other end of the line, and then she hit me with it. So what? You can't just take them to court over something like this. They're our parents. You need to let it go. I had to laugh. I couldn't help it. Let it go? Are you serious? They sold something that didn't belong to them. That's illegal. This isn't just some misunderstanding, like they want you to think. She got defensive right away. They were just trying to help me out. I've been going through a lot and they didn't want to use their own savings. What's the big deal? It's just a car. That's when I lost it. It's not just a car. It's about them not respecting me or Patricia. They think they can do whatever they want, and we're just supposed to smile and nod because it's family. But this time they crossed the line. She was quiet for a second, and I could tell she didn't really care about what I was saying. She just wanted me to stop causing trouble for our parents. Then she tried to guilt trip me. You've always had it easier, she said, like that was supposed to mean something to me. You've got a good job, a good boyfriend. You don't need the money like I do. Mom and Dad thought you'd understand. I was done. You think this is about money? It's about them stealing from Patricia and then blaming me for it. And now you're calling me, acting like I'm the bad guy? You know what? I don't care what you think. This isn't your problem. This is between me, Patricia, and our parents, so stay out of it. She didn't like that at all. You're being selfish, she snapped. They raised you, they've done so much for you, and this is how you repay them? I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had no clue what I'd been through with them, how I'd always been treated like the one who had to understand everyone else's problems. I wasn't their priority, not ever. But now, when they were in trouble, suddenly it was all about family and how much I owed them? I don't owe them anything, I said firmly. And I definitely don't owe you an explanation. I'm done with this conversation. Before she could say anything else, I hung up and immediately blocked her number. I didn't need that kind of negativity in my life, especially not now. Patricia, who had been sitting next to me the whole time, just shook his head. "You okay?" he asked, clearly knowing I wasn't. "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't. "It's just, she doesn't get it. None of them do." Patricia nodded, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He knew this was bigger than the car. It was about years of being the one who had to let things slide while my sister got everything handed to her. It was about my parents always assuming I'd be fine, that I'd take care of myself because I was doing well. But this time, I wasn't going to just let it go. This time, I was standing up for myself. And for Patricia. He deserved better than to have his car sold off like it was nothing, and I deserved better than to be treated like an afterthought. Later that night, we sat down and talked through the next steps. Patricia was still set on pressing charges, and honestly, I was too. But before we did that, we decided to give my parents one last chance to make it right. I knew it was probably pointless, but a small part of me was hoping they'd finally realize how badly they'd messed up. We drove back to their house the next morning, and I was dreading it the whole way there. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to go well. When we rang the doorbell, my dad answered again. This time, he didn't even try to hide his irritation. "What do you want now?" he snapped. Patricia stepped forward. "We're giving you one last chance," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Either you get the car back, or we're going to court. Your choice." My dad's face turned red and I could see him clenching his fists. "You think you can come in here and make demands?" he growled. "This is my house and you don't tell me what to do." I sighed. This was exactly what I expected. They weren't going to back down. They never did. "Dad, we're not here to fight," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We just want the car back. That's it. If you can't do that, then we have no choice." My mom appeared in the doorway then, looking all teary-eyed again. "Please," she begged, "don't do this. We're family." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I was doing something wrong. I just felt tired. Tired of being the one who had to understand. Tired of being the one who had to let things go for the sake of family. "This isn't about family," I said quietly. "It's about respect. And you lost mine the second you sold that car." We turned and walked away, leaving them standing there. As we drove off, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I knew this wasn't the end, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. Update 3. After that last visit to my parents' house, I knew things were over. There wasn't going to be any fixing this. They'd made their decision, and so had I. But what happened next wasn't something I saw coming. A couple of days went by with no word from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. Patricia and I were ready to move forward with legal action, and while it still felt a bit surreal to be in that position, we had both come to terms with it. But then, out of nowhere, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number this time. I almost didn't answer, figuring it was some random telemarketer, but something told me to pick it up. Turns out, it was the guy who bought Patricia's car. Now, I have no idea how this dude got my number, but he was calling to let me know that my parents had reached out to him. Apparently, they were trying to get the car back, offering him more money than he originally paid. That part made sense. What didn't make sense was what he told me next. "They're saying that the car's theirs, but something didn't sit right with me," the guy said over the phone. I looked into the paperwork more closely and saw that the title's still in someone else's name. Patricia's, I'm guessing? I sat there stunned. So not only had my parents sold the car without my permission, but they had done it without even transferring the title properly. It was still Patricia's car, legally, and they hadn't even noticed, or didn't care enough to fix it. I explained the situation to the guy on the phone, how my parents had sold it without asking, how Patricia was pressing charges, the whole deal. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he sighed. "I had a feeling something was off," he said. "Look, I don't want to be involved in any legal mess, so I'm willing to give the car back if you guys cover what I paid for it." I told him I'd have to talk to Patricia, but honestly, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders just knowing the car could be returned. When I hung up, I immediately told Patricia what happened, and he was on board with the plan. We'd get the car back, pay the guy what he was owed, and call off the lawsuit. It seemed like the cleanest way to get out of this mess. So we set up a time to meet the guy and retrieve the car. When we got there, everything went smoothly. He handed over the keys, we paid him, and just like that, Patricia's SUV was back where it belonged. It was a relief, but it didn't erase the damage my parents had caused. As we drove away, Patricia turned to me. "What now?" he asked, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the car. What now was the big question. My parents had crossed a line, and even though we got the car back, the trust was shattered. I didn't see how we could come back from this. I thought about it for a while, but eventually I said, "I think I'm done with them." Patricia didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded like he understood. And honestly, he probably did. He had been right there with me through all of it, watching how my parents put my sister first and treated me like a backup plan. He knew that this wasn't just about the car, it was about a lifetime of being second place in my own family. The next day, I blocked my parents' numbers. I didn't want to hear their excuses anymore, didn't want to deal with the guilt trips or the crying, or whatever else they thought might change my mind. I was done. A week passed, and for the first time in forever, things were quiet. I didn't realize how much space my parents took up in my head until they weren't there anymore. It felt weird at first, but then it felt freeing. I could finally focus on my own life, on my relationship with Patricia, without the constant pressure of trying to please my family. But of course, that didn't last long. A few days later, I got a text from my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in ages. She wanted to know what was going on between me and my parents, saying they were devastated and didn't understand why I was shutting them out. I didn't reply. I knew that if I did, it would just turn into more drama. My parents were good at playing the victim, and I wasn't about to get sucked back in. Then, out of nowhere, my sister texted me. I hadn't heard from her since that last blow-up on the phone, so seeing her name pop up on my screen made my stomach drop. I didn't want to deal with her, but part of me was curious, so I opened the message. "You seriously blocked Mom and Dad? What's wrong with you?" That was it. No apology, no attempt to understand my side of things, just more blame. I didn't even bother replying. I blocked her too. Patricia and I decided to take a trip to clear our heads. We packed up the car, the real car this time, and hit the road for a few days. It wasn't a big vacation or anything, just a little getaway to remind ourselves that life didn't have to be full of drama and chaos. It was nice to get some distance from everything, to spend time with the one person who had been solid through all of this. On the way back home, I thought a lot about the whole situation with my parents. Part of me was still sad about how things turned out. I mean, no one really wants to cut off their family. But at the same time, I knew it was the right choice. My parents weren't going to change. They would always put my sister first, always expect me to just deal with whatever nonsense they threw at me because that's what I'd always done. But not anymore. When we got back from the trip, I felt different. Lighter. Like I had finally let go of something that had been weighing me down for years. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting my parents control my life. I was done being the backup plan, the one who had to understand and make sacrifices for everyone else. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good.